You are a child of the cosmos, the one who brings love into the world. Love to give and love to receive. You are the radiant reflection of the Creator, expressing the joy of the universe. Open yourself to the sound of the Beloved singing itself through you. Imagine your qualities as precious gemstones awaiting your discovery. Let yourself bask in the perfect glory of who you are. I enter into this day fully embracing my divinity, my power, and my presence as the beloved treasure of God. I am part of the great I Am, and I am a miracle. Today, I let the miracle-working power of the Beloved produce perfect results in my life. And so it is.
So let's welcome our own Lark. She'll be leading us in a very different kind of experience.
Thank you, Janet. So before we start, though, I want to give a plug for this Saturday, July 19th. A year ago, Reverend Rogers asked us to pray about some concerns with our facilities. One was the memory garden and fountain restoration. One was doing something about the condition of our parking lots. And one was the education building and what we can use that for. So we've been asking people to pray for this past year. And when it came time for a year, I was having some dinner with some church friends, and I said, you know, what should we do now that we've had this time to pray? And Diane Lesso, a good friend, said, oh, I know exactly what you should do. And she outlined this whole day for me. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what we should do. So we are getting everybody together, starting at 9 o'clock with coffee and tea. We'll open with prayer. And then we're going to let those people who are interested talk about what they want to do in those areas, their ideas, the things they've prayed about, God downloads, whatever it is. And we're going to take notes. We're going to be sharing with each other. We're going to look at maybe some proposed next steps. And all of that is to share with the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees then has to take all that input and prayerfully consider what is the most promising and practical ideas before they make any decision or proposal. So we really want you to consider coming to this day. Everybody's welcome. We are asking you to sign up because we're going to provide a light lunch. So if you'd like to be a part of that, we'd really love to have you. Now, if you haven't been praying for an entire year on these subjects, you got a month, right? You got some days to start praying before we have to do anything. So please think about coming. I'm the Director of Education here. Did I say that? Sorry, I'm a little tired. I'm the Director of Education here, and while we're in this interim period between ministers, I'm also finding our guest speakers and arranging for them. We had a guest speaker for this week, and she let us know that she couldn't come, plenty of time, and normally it'd be easy enough for me to find a replacement speaker, but I got sick, and then I got sicker, and then I lost all track of time and space. So we decided, thinking about it, that we could give this talk together, and I'll explain what I mean as I go. When I first started in New Thought, I was in a little tiny CSL church in Lakewood, California called Living Beyond Limits. I loved it. Whenever I took a class, Reverend Michelle gave a challenge. She would say, don't take my word for this. Test it out. Find proof of the principles in your own life. She was right. I learned that my life story, my life experiences, bore out the spiritual truths I was learning and using. For everyone, your life story reveals the principles in action. Your life story holds the truth. In 2023, Laura Hill came and had an idea for a class. She enlisted my help, and then along with her husband, Rob's, we decided to look at happiness. Laura's idea was to dive into the neurological and positive psychology research on happiness. Arthur Brooks' work revealed that 30% of personal happiness is within the individual's control. And we thought, well, that's great, but how do you control it? So using that as our premise and loosely following themes of Gretchen Rubin's book on happiness, we, along with about 20 other participants, engaged in 12 months of personal experiments. Each month we selected a project based on a theme, and for a month we took note if our new behavior, our new attitude, or our new prayer life created more happiness in our lives. Then to gauge if we were increasing our own personal happiness, we needed a measurement tool. So Laura came up with the Eeyore to Tigger continuum. The idea was to figure out your personal starting point and then assess each month if your personal happiness experiment had moved you further along the continuum. The same principle that I learned in Living Beyond Limits was true throughout this happiness adventure. My life story showed me spiritual truth in action. So one of my projects was to notice glimmers. And a glimmer is when you spot something and for a minute it makes you smile or makes your heart leap, and then your life is so busy you just go on and forget about it. But I would then note, that's a glimmer, and stop and hold it and savor it. And that really changed my life. That changed my attitude about life. That changed the way I walked through life. Another time we were given a theme and I decided I would try journaling. I'm a writer, this should be easy. I bought a special, beautiful notebook and a cool pen, and I wrote the first day, and that's the last day I ever wrote in my journal. Apparently, I'm not a journaler. And that was okay. It was about experimenting, right? Trying, looking at things, etc. You see, change, any lasting change, is a job from the inside out. And I went to spend some time today acknowledging how the power of prayer changes us and our lives from the inside out. Today, when we said aloud our unity is proclamation, we said our spiritual journey is based on the teachings of Jesus and the power of prayer. If you know some of the history of other founders of unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, then you know that Myrtle Fillmore used the power of prayer to change her life. She committed herself to intense daily conversations with Jesus and long silences of listening for the divine in her life. Myrtle used her life as an experiment to understand the power of prayer. And through prayer, she found healing. She was able to heal herself from tuberculosis. I know that many people here today have a story about the power of prayer in their own lives. Sometimes the truth we discover is that prayer changes the person doing the praying. When driving to my college teaching job, I prayed for my students to be willing to learn. What I discovered is that my heart needed to see my students as children of God, doing the best that they knew how. It changed my whole attitude toward my adult students. Other times, the truth we receive is that a fervent or desperate prayer was answered, but not in the way we had expected. A woman told me she prayed for her severe in-laws to accept her unconditionally. She realized that her prayer had been answered when she learned how to love and accept her in-laws unconditionally. Sometimes it is prayer from other people that really makes a difference in your life. I loved being part of the prayer chaplain ministry here at the church, and people would come up and request prayer, and I would pray for them. And when the prayer was over, they would light up like they heard a truth they hadn't heard before. They recognized something important. They had a new insight into themselves or to the divine. So today, you are going to have the opportunity to share your experiences with the power of prayer, though I have some guidelines for sharing. When you share, I want you to take the deep dive. What I mean by that is to tell your story effectively. Be like a pearl diver, right? They go straight down, they get what they need, and they come back up. They do not spend time looking at the fish or noticing other divers or anything else. So you want to go straight to the lesson, the aha moment, or the profound change. What you don't want to do is wander around in circumstances. So I'm going to give you an example. I was very hurt. My husband's family didn't seem to accept me. It was a second marriage, and I felt very judged and kept at arm's length. So I prayed for God to change the situation. What God did was reveal to me that I was the one doing the judging and holding people away. Once I changed my attitude from hurt to loving, our relationships opened and flourished. That's a deep dive. What we don't want to hear is a wandering story filled with unnecessary details and circumstances. So now I'm going to tell you the same story. I was very hurt. My husband's family didn't seem to accept me. My brother-in-law criticized my cranberry stuffing and called my serving dishes quaint. It was a second marriage, you see, and I know that they all adored his first wife, but she was a really toxic person. And they'd been divorced for more than 10 years when I met him. It's not like I broke up the marriage, so I couldn't understand why these family members were so standoffish, judging my every move. I've been talking for the same length of time, and yet you're not really sure how prayer did anything, right? So we want to be good at telling the story so that everyone can understand how prayer affected us. For you storytellers out there, I know this is hard to accept, but the circumstances don't matter. What is important is the lesson, the new knowledge, the change in your life. So take the deep dive. In a minute, I'll invite you to come to the microphone and choose one of the following topics. When prayer changed you. So you were praying and you became aware of a change. When you experienced an unexpected answer to prayer, or how prayer from others made a difference in your life. I'm going to be watching the time, so as you share, I may interrupt you to say, take the deep dive, or let's wrap it up, right, if it's going too long. I also want you to be aware that if you come up here to share, you will appear on the YouTube video this week. So let's get started. If you have a prayer story to share, come on up.
So this was about 20 years ago. It was just about the time I started coming to Unity with my wife, Rita. And I was working at Yavapai College, and I hurt my wrist reinstalling a misinstalled seat in one of the vans. And by that night, I couldn't move my left shoulder. And by the morning, it had gone to my right shoulder, and in 3 days, I was just crippled. I could barely walk. I couldn't sleep. I maybe slept an hour a night for 6 months or 6 weeks. And the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. They just gave me lots and lots of pain pills. I became very well acquainted with morphine and Vicodin. And finally, in desperation, my wife and I decided to try prayer. And my wife organized, because I wasn't capable of doing this, all of these people. And I forget how many, 10 or 12 of them came to the house. And there were another 20 or 30 that all knew when this was going to happen, that were going to sit wherever they were and put their energy into it. And I laid down on her massage table, and all of these people put their hands on me, and I went to sleep. And I woke up 3 hours later, never took another pain pill.
So I call them God jobs. I call them God jobs. Whoa. And there's been so many, but my husband and I were looking for a home, a little bit bigger, and people that a pet sit for were in this amazing house, and I showed her the home of her dreams, and she said, "We would like you to be able to buy our house." There was no way. I mean, it's amazing. So, and I'm really tight with money. My mom had passed. She'd left me some money. And Paula texted and she said, "We have a price." And I said, "Okay, we'll give you a call in about 15 minutes. So I made Ken sit down next to me. He's not a praying kind of guy. And I said, "God, I need a sign so big that it is beyond a bulletin board. I mean, this is a lot of money. This is very important. This is going to uproot everything for us. And thank you, and amen." And I called Paula, and the price that she gave us was within $5 of what I had gotten from my mom. It was mind-bending. Ken turned around and goes, "That was a God job, wasn't it?" It's like, yeah, that's what God does. That's what prayer does. Yes.
This is the simplicity of prayer. I was in Home Depot. I was having one of those days, and I was just very frustrated. Everything was going wrong. Everything was breaking. Couldn't find anything. And I paused, and I stopped, and I just bowed my head. And I said, "Please, God, I need some help here. Help me to realize that everything's okay, that I am surrounded by the love of God." And instantaneously, everything mellowed down. I relaxed. And for the rest of that visit to Home Depot, everything went great. Just fell right into place. It's a God job.
Many, 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 many years ago, when I lived in Alaska, I was skiing, not skiing, I was sledding with my children and a bunch of other people on a slope down to the river in front of our house. And after one run, I realized my watch was missing. And I thought, oh no, and I looked at that vast expanse of the snow, and I thought, how am I don't see it. I don't know where to, I really loved that watch. And I just stopped, and I just prayed right then. And I just said, I know this is not maybe a big, big thing, but it's big to me. I really want to find my watch. Lord, please help me find my watch. And I took, almost without thinking about it, 2 steps away, plunged my hand in the snow, and came up with my watch. Another God moment. And what I learned then is that there is always enough of God's love, God's help, that the universe is saying yes to our needs and our wants, and it's not limited. It's not that God has just, an X number of favors to give, So that is the lesson that I learned, and since then, prayer has always been very important to me because I know it works.
In 2002, I had ovarian cancer, and it was very serious. And I was in having my surgery, and the nurses and everybody prayed the Our Father with me. And it was wonderful. And after the surgery, I didn't wake up. And at one point, I heard the doctor say, "She's gone." And I went up in the white light, and my grandparents were there. And they said, "No, you have to go back. It's not your time." And my oldest son, who's an atheist, was praying for me. All my family were there at the hospital, and they all prayed for me, and I came back.
So I had a pretty long and chaotic and varied career, and was coming to a time in my life when I realized that, okay, it's time to settle down. It's time to not do this anymore. I was so unrooted, having moved 17 times in 35 years. And I had a friend, I owned a rental in Mesquite, Nevada. I had a friend who kept telling me about Prescott because her aunt lived here. And I'm like, so I'm having conversations with God. I don't know if I pray so much as I have conversations. Like, okay, what do you want me to do here? One day I'm looking in my iPad and I find a very cheap ticket to Phoenix, Arizona. So, not having anything to do on a particular weekend, I jumped on a plane and went to Phoenix, got on the shuttle, came up here, had made contact with a real estate agent, and she drove me into an area here in Prescott, and I immediately thought, wow, I could make this my home. That was on a Saturday. Then on a Sunday, I came to this church, and I knew that I was home. God had brought me here.
Hey, so I've never been very good at praying. I mean, for parking spaces and stuff, and that works sometimes. But I do very often get that voice when I need it. And sometimes I don't understand what it's saying. But if I follow it, I'm always glad I did. So in 2010, I lost my child, my son. I couldn't sleep. I was in a pretty bad place. And my husband had to go out of town on a job, so I was all by myself. He'd been gone about 3-4 months at this time. I'm lying in bed, and the voice said, "Look in your nightstand drawer." And I thought, why would I do that? No, very quietly, just look in your nightstand drawer. I thought, all right, I'm not sleeping anyway, so I turn on the light, and I open the drawer, and I pull out pens and papers and stuff that I've stuffed in there. And at the very, very bottom of the drawer, I pulled out a card, and it said "Mom" on the envelope. And I pulled out the card, and I opened it up, and it was one of those cards that record voices. And it was "Happy Mother's Day, Mom, I love you," and that was his voice. And we have a thing about sea turtles. We shared love of sea turtles, and he had drawn me 2 sea turtles in the card, which is now in a frame on my nightstand now. So that was something, right? That was something and that's happened other times in my life. Even if I listen to it, it's always something wonderful.
Hi, I'm Kylie. Where to begin? There's so many different things I've prayed for in my life, and God has answered in various ways. Not always the way I thought it might have should or wanted it to be, but in the way that was what was in my highest best interest. There's a quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer that's always stuck to my brain cells, what little of them there are left. And the quote was, "If prayer is you talking to God, then intuition is God talking to you." So I learned years ago about kinesiology and using your intuition. So I've done that for many, many years. I've had many experiences, but the one that's most recent to me is little older than my husband, and he has thought on deciding what to do about retirement. He did retire once some years ago, about 3 months, and like a little puppy dog, he followed me around the house every day, hanging over my shoulder. What can I do? What can I help? And I told him, you got to go back to work. So he did, and I said, if you're going to retire again, please find some hobbies, things that you can do. And right now he's on family medical leave of absence because his very precious sister passed away before her time. And so we've been together for 24/7 now for about 2 months and going on another month. And I'm finding out, and I've prayed a lot about this, how we would be together so that maybe, you think, oh, we're going to kill each other, if we're together that long. But we're not. It's anything. My prayer's been answered, that we've gotten so much closer. Our love is just deepened more and more every day, which I pray for. And I know he'll make the right decision in deciding to retire and when. I just leave it up to God's word. But it has made a world of difference to me. The power of prayer is tremendous. Thank you for listening.
Back in the 1980s, I used to introduce myself all the time as a grateful, recovering, you can just fill in the blank. I had all of those isms that people talk about. And one of the most difficult part of 12-step programs is figuring out what your higher power is. And back then, I didn't really have a clue. And like so many people new in the program, I was fumbling my way through it. And I got sick for one of the first times in my life. And I was laid out for weeks. And finally, after about 3 weeks, I couldn't hardly get up off the couch. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't do much of anything. I finally just said words that I'd heard in meetings. I said, God, you've got to help me. I can't handle this. And no kidding, it was like somebody hit my funny bone, and the zap went through my body. And from that moment on, I knew that I had a higher power, and I got better. And with it, very quickly, I got better. And so that was my burning bush, if you will. And what I've learned is when you can get that proper level of humility, where you've hit bottom and you have no more resistance, that's when prayer really starts to work. And it works for me whenever I turn it on. Like somebody said, I'm not real good at it, but it's a wonderful tool. Thank you.
So I have a God job, power of prayer story. Back in 2012, I switched jobs and moved from Port Ludlow, Washington, which is across the Puget Sound from Seattle, to Spokane, Washington. But we couldn't sell our house because it was, remember the 2008 housing crisis? There were over 50 houses that banks owned in my neighborhood. And so people would look at my house that was for sale and go, oh, I can buy this house like this down the street for $50,000 less from the bank. And we'd already moved, and we were taking care of this house 330 miles away from where we lived, and just trying to get it sold. Wasn't selling. 11 months go by. And as a school teacher, I can't afford 2 mortgages, so we're living in a single-wide trailer, okay? My wife wasn't really happy about that. So finally, my wife and I said, well, let's get with the prayer chaplain after church. So we went, sat down with the prayer chaplain, prayed about selling our house, go home, get this phone call from the realtor, 3 o'clock that afternoon. We have a full price offer on your house. And these people bought our house for full price. And I've been a Unitic since 1982, and I'm thinking, well, duh, this was dumb. I should have done this 11 months ago.
Okay, I really want to thank you. Thank you, Dave, for participating today, for being part of the message. And I hope that you, as I was very moved by hearing how people have prayer change their life.